Something that I enjoy very much about the work that I do is that I get the unique opportunity of going into different organizations and coaching people from different industries, and then learning about how their particular organization or industry operates. I don't typically talk about my clients publicly unless they tag me in some sort of social media post, which they are more than welcome to do. But I thought it might be helpful from time to time for me to share what I'm hearing and seeing. So any patterns that stand out as I'm going into different organizations to do culture, leadership, and team effectiveness work, and as I talk to various coaching clients. So I'm going to consider these segments my field notes or notes from the field. And hopefully it will give you something to ponder for your own organizations and perhaps a few ideas to implement. Or maybe it will just validate your own work experience by hearing what other people are going through. Something I want to share with you today relates to how companies are coming back or creating a new normal post-COVID. And I know we so desperately just wanted to flip a switch and return to the way things once were, but the reality is that we adjusted and adapted to a new and different way of working for close to 2 years. What I find a lot of companies struggling with right now is essentially around where work is done and how work is done now that we're in this new normal. I don't consider it a random coincidence that within a 48-hour period, I had multiple coaching clients complaining about the number of meetings on their calendar. And I attended a conference in which two great presenters, Kate Reed and Valerie Hart Warner from Wonder and Grow, spoke about how to bring the practice of mindfulness to meetings. So today's episode is devoted to meetings. And there are a few work topics that have more memes floating around about them than meetings do. And for good reason. Who likes meetings? No one, unless you're the one calling them. And then perhaps you might say yes. One of my coaching clients said he had 4 meetings on his calendar for the same time. 4. That's ridiculous. And I asked him, is that a cultural thing or just a part of the role he plays in the organization, or really what it was that required him to be in so many meetings? And one of the things he said that I thought was so intriguing is that pre-COVID, there used to be one meeting every day that everyone attended in person, and most things were hashed out during that time. Once the lockdown started and everyone was sent home, Teams meetings started popping up everywhere. And he mentioned how quick and easy it is just to throw a Teams meeting together. And suddenly, even though they're back in the office now, the habit created during the lockdown hasn't changed. And if you feel like you're in more meetings now than ever before, you are likely not wrong. Research shows people attend 13% more meetings now than they did pre-pandemic. And if it makes you feel better, the meetings are shorter, but there are more of them. And that doesn't make me feel better at all, because what that tells me is that your brain is having to do more frequent task switching. And that's actually very taxing from a cognitive perspective. It's estimated that only 50% of all time spent in meetings is effective, and virtual meetings score even lower. Woof. Actually, I think those numbers are high. According to one McKinsey survey, 61% of executives said that at least half the time they spent making decisions, much of it surely spent in meetings, was ineffective. And just 37% of respondents said their organization's decisions were both timely and high quality. And in a different survey, 80% of executives were considering or already implementing changes in meeting structure and cadence in response to the evolution of how people worked during the pandemic. Israeli executive Dov Froman said half of a leader's time should be unscheduled. Half. What? What would one do with all of that free time? Well, for one thing, they could actually work on getting things done from all of the action items that come from meetings they attend. And they could spend that time reading to further their knowledge and value to the organization. They can use that time to reflect on decisions and actions through postmortems and after-action reviews. And they can focus on deep work and strategy for the future. Because here's the deal. With those types of activities, they don't happen in the 4 minutes you have in between meetings. You need more time than that. So why do we even have meetings? This was a question I literally referred to the Google for. And side note, I cracked up because as I was doing a little bit of research for this episode, I found an article in the Harvard Business Review from March of 1976 about how to run better meetings. So apparently, this is not a new issue. But why do we even have meetings? I found this definition from the company Atlassian on why meetings should happen and their definition of an effective meeting, and I really liked it. An effective meeting brings a thoughtfully selected group of people together for a specific purpose, provides a forum for open discussion, and delivers a tangible result, meaning a decision, a plan, a list of great ideas to pursue, or a shared understanding of the work ahead. And not only that, but the result is then shared with others whose work may be affected. I'm going to read that again because I like it so much. An effective meeting brings a thoughtfully selected group of people together for a specific purpose, provides a forum for open discussion, and delivers a tangible result, meaning some kind of decision, a plan, a list of great ideas to pursue, a shared understanding of the work ahead. Not only that, but the result is then shared with others whose work may be affected. In theory, that's what meetings are all about and why they should happen. But let's be honest, we get this wrong a lot, like at least 50% of the time. So let's talk about information sharing. I think that's one of our biggest meeting offenders and why we see so many memes floating around that say, just sat through another meeting that could have been an email. Live interaction can be useful for information sharing, especially when you're sharing something that's nuanced, emotional, or highly interpretive, or maybe the information is sensitive. But information sharing meetings are often regarded as having limited value, and many organizations have recently moved to drastically improve meeting efficiency. Netflix, for example, has limited the duration of meetings to a maximum of 30 minutes, and they require that meetings involving one-way information sharing be canceled in favor of other mechanisms like a memo, a podcast, or a vlog. And that change has resulted in Netflix reducing meetings by more than 65%. And more than 85% of employees favored the approach. Now, I know what you may be thinking. Oh, Laura, I get this, but I work in a team or organization that loves to have meetings and there's nothing I can do about it. Wrong. There's plenty you can do. First of all, never underestimate the impact and influence that one person can have in changing behaviors. I'm going to give you some tips on things you can do if you're a meeting organizer or a meeting attendee. So let's start with meeting organizers. Before you click that little button on your calendar to create a meeting, please think through the following steps. Number one, ask yourself, does a meeting really need to happen? I want you to tell me why. Why does that meeting have to happen? And why can't it be solved another way? Instead of defaulting to a meeting, I'm challenging you to think of a meeting as a last resort option. Prove to me there's no other way that this meeting has to happen. Now, assuming you've determined that a meeting must happen, let's make sure it's the most effective meeting possible. I'm going to steal an acronym from my friend, Ed Wallace, from Achieve Next. And Ed has written many books, one of which including Relational Capital. And in that book, Ed likes to say that your meetings should pop, P-O-P, an acronym. Again, he writes about this in his book, Relational Capital. And we also talked about it a bit in episode 47 of this podcast. So by all means, please go back and listen. Okay. Meetings should pop. Let's walk through the acronym. The first P stands for purpose. What is the purpose of your meeting? You need to be able to answer the what and the why aspects of the meeting. So what is the specific work to be completed? And then why describes the benefits to the participants. Wait, what? There's supposed to be a benefit to the people attending other than me, the organizer, who likely needs something from these people? Yes. What benefit do they get from attending your meeting? This is a good one to ponder. And please do not get me started on, well, the benefit is that they'll learn the information I have to share. Really? Does it have to be shared via email? Please reference what we discussed earlier about information sharing. Can it be an email versus a meeting? So ask yourself, does it have to be a meeting? As you're thinking about attendees, please calculate the cost of each person being there. Take their annual salary, divide by 2,080, and that's their hourly rate. Yes, if you've always wondered how to do that. Take it from the girl who used to do payroll 100 years ago. Take the annual salary number divided by 2,080. That's the hourly rate. And my friend used to do this all the time. He'd look around the room at 25 executives at a table and then estimate how much money an hour-long meeting cost for all of those people to be in the room. Make sure you really need those people there before you add them to the list, and make sure it's worth the cost. I know some people that get invited to a ton of meetings because they have a lot of varied institutional knowledge, so they can be helpful in meetings where new products or new business is being discussed. Oftentimes, they get nothing out of that meeting. They're essentially just there for other people to pick their brain. And that's great if they're a consultant, but typically these people are not there to be your personal business consultant. They actually have a day job. And so you're getting in their way of getting that day job done. So just please be sensitive to their time and recognize there's a lot of people that are probably demanding their time through other meetings. Another reason we add people to a meeting is in order to make sure no one feels left out and that everyone has a voice. And I totally get this and appreciate the spirit from where this behavior comes from. But again, if it's information sharing, that can be handled offline with those people. Otherwise, if you're inviting them, they should be expected to contribute in some way to the meeting, not just sit and listen so that you can check a box. It's very important to invite people that have diverse perspectives, which will result in a better decision. But remember, the expectation is that those diverse perspectives will be listened to and valued, not ignored if they provide an alternative to what you want to do. The purpose of your meeting should not just be to have a bunch of yes people around you saying yes to your ideas so you can get a green light and move forward. Think long and hard about your motivations and what the true purpose of the meeting is. So that's the P in POP. The O stands for outcomes. What outcomes will the participants leave the meeting with? And what outcomes are you accomplishing by holding this meeting? I'd like to take this time to address roles. Every person you invite to this meeting should serve some sort of role, and they should be impacted by the outcomes, or there's no reason for them to be there in the first place. So pay attention to the engagement levels of the people in your next meeting. Are they looking at other devices? Are they doing something else during your meeting, aka multitasking, which is not really a thing, by the way? If they're doing those things, that tells me they don't see benefits of being in the meeting and that their role isn't clear as to what they're expected to do and why they're there in the first place. So I love this tip from Slack. If meeting participants don't expect to be called on, they'll be more likely to tune out. And so you can remedy this by establishing a continual expectation of meaningful involvement. Ooh. Aim to never go longer than 5 minutes without giving the team a problem to solve or a question to answer or an opportunity to engage in some way. So again, what are the takeaways or the outcomes for the meeting? Will all of the participants know and understand their role in the meeting? And then what do they need to do when the meeting concludes? Are there takeaways or some reasonable expectation of what they're supposed to accomplish, or are there overly ambitious expectations for the time that are allotted? And this one is a classic. I love being invited to a problem-solving meeting that's 30 minutes and it takes 20 minutes to define the problem. There's no way we're coming up with a solution in 10 minutes. That's just annoying and a waste of everyone's time. So be reasonable and realistic with what you're expecting to accomplish as an outcome of the meeting. And the last P in the POP acronym stands for process. This represents the actual steps your meeting will follow to achieve the purpose and outcomes. How can you best set yourself and the participants up for success? Do you have an agenda for the meeting? Okay, this is something that I was terrible at and still am, but I'm trying to get better. But do you have an agenda for your meeting? And if you do, did you send it out in advance by at least 24 hours? Again, guilty. I'm not here to preach as the meeting expert. I'm just giving you some tips here that I'm going to try to follow too. So do you have an agenda? Did you send it out at least 24 hours in advance? And did you set the expectation for the participants as to why they've been invited? Okay, and then once the meeting starts, are you going to actually stick to the agenda during the meeting? Also a challenge for me. As we think about process, think about realistically how long it will take to review what's on the agenda and then allow for appropriate levels of engagement from the participants. And here's another thought. Don't just use the default meeting times on your calendar of 30 and 60 minutes. People who know me well know one of my biggest meeting pet peeves is when someone ends a meeting 4 minutes early and says, well, if nobody else has anything to add, I'll give you 4 minutes back in your day. Okay, first of all, you do not own my time, so you're not giving me my own time back. And secondly, thanks. What am I going to accomplish in those 4 minutes? Not a whole lot before I go to the next meeting. So, side note, one of Laura's pet peeves. But on a similar note, let's be real smart about last minute meetings. This is another pet peeve of mine. People who slide a meeting onto my calendar last minute. So they'll find that 1.5 hour block of time that might be free on the calendar and schedule a meeting. And often when that's the case, there is no agenda. And there is often no description as to why I have been invited to this meeting. And so I get that emergencies happen, and that's different. But again, I think when people do this, it's more about their agenda and their to-do list and what they need to accomplish, rather than respecting your time and what's on your to-do list and what you're trying to accomplish. So let's all be ultra respectful of people's time. Instead of sliding onto their calendar last minute, you could just send them a note about what you need and then see when it's convenient for them to meet. That also gives them a heads up on what you want to talk about. Process is not my favorite thing, I'll be honest, but meeting discipline does lead to meeting success. And if you're the organizer, you're in charge of ensuring success. Let's say you're on the receiving end of an invite. Please pause before you click accept and think it through. What is the purpose of this meeting? What is your role? What benefit do you get from attending? Is there an agenda? The speakers from Spark Wonder used a saying I just loved: no agenda, no attenda. I do not want to be responsible for getting anyone in trouble at work, so please be smart about this. But think about whether you can push back on attending to the meeting. Do you have to be there? When I'm double booked or triple booked, this is so easy for me because I have to say no. I literally cannot be in 2 or 3 places at once. Side note, if any of you have figured out how to do that, please let me know. But that decision's made up for me. I have to say no in those scenarios. And do you know what's fascinating about that? Oftentimes, the meeting goes on without me, which always makes me wonder whether I was really that critical of an attendee anyway. So I want you to take a deep breath and then pull up your calendar and look at all of the meetings you have over the next week. Whew, I know, that's why I said take a deep breath. How many of those meetings did you schedule, and how many are you expected to attend? And how many of these are reoccurring meetings? Because those are also culprits of wasted time. What is your role in each one of the meetings that you have on your calendar? And do you have to attend each one? Can you maybe delegate or decline any of the meetings? And when are you going to get your work done? Because that's the other issue I'm seeing. People are in meetings from sunup to sundown, and then they're trying to figure out when to get the work done. And guess when they do it? After hours. Do you think someone's going to give you their best work after they've been in meetings for 8 to 10 solid hours? No. Lastly, if you're in a people leader role and you'd really like to be a hero, how about ask your direct reports about the meeting cadence you've established and the rhythm for your department, as well as all of the other meetings they get pulled into, and ask them how many meetings they have on their calendar for this week, how many hours they're spending in meetings this week. Their answers may shock you. Solicit their thoughts and ideas on any meetings that can be shortened, improved, or maybe canceled altogether. And where you can influence it, find opportunities for you and your team to have large blocks of unstructured or unscheduled time. You can institute no meeting days or no meeting blocks of times, or really just create more boundaries around the hours that meetings occur. So for example, you could say, we're not going to have meetings before 9 o'clock a.m. We're not going to have meetings during lunchtime, unless it's a team building lunch and you're buying lunch, because I'm a big fan of those types of lunches and meeting times. You could say maybe no meetings after 3 o'clock p.m. I have had approximately 6,000 bosses in my career, and I do not think any of them have ever sat me down and ran through this kind of an exercise with me. So you can be a total hero if you do this. And lead by example. Make sure you follow the POP model. Run super effective meetings. Allow your team to learn what they can about setting boundaries by watching you and how you set meeting boundaries. And by all means, as you're going through your calendar, delegating and canceling and creating meetings, please ensure you are creating time and space to have one meaningful conversation with each person on your team each week. It doesn't have to be a long conversation, but there's so much research around this. And I'm going to dive into that on a different episode. But take the time to have one meaningful conversation each week with each person on your team. Doesn't have to be a long meeting. And when I say meaningful, I just mean focused on their goals. Okay, there you have it. This podcast episode was intended for the purpose of sharing information. Your role was to listen and hopefully put into practice the ideas I've shared around effective meetings. No meeting minutes were generated because this is not a meeting. But if you missed anything, feel free to go back and listen again. And I wish you happy meetings, everyone.